Okay, thanks again for doing that. If you are here for the Roadmap to Achieving Cybersecurity Compliance webinar, you are in the right place. I am Susie. I'm the Marketing Director here at 2W Technologies and will be the moderator for today. If at any time during today's presentations you have questions, please send them through the chat feature that's on your screen. We're going to get to an interactive Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we'll try to get to all the questions then. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, 2W Technologies is a full-service Epicor and IT infrastructure consulting firm. We specialize in solutions for the manufacturing industry, but we have clients from other various industries as well. If you want any more information on our products or services, you can visit us at 2wtech.com. The presenters for today are going to be Mark Jamieson, who is our President and CEO, and Joshua Schultz, who is our resident expert in everything security. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark to get us started.
Okay, hey, thanks, Sue. I'm Mark Jamieson. Next to me here is Josh Schultz. He runs our cybersecurity group. And just what everybody wants for Christmas, we're going to talk about cybersecurity and compliance and what the heck you're going to do. The fact of the matter is that if you try to go do this yourself, it becomes very, very confusing. Google is a huge non-help when it comes to trying to fix your own cybersecurity stuff. And the fact of the matter is that you probably are going to be faced with some sort of compliance regulation that you're going to have to face, you're going to have to comply to in the next year or so. And there's new regulations coming down. It's an alphabet soup of stuff. And we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so walking you through it and trying to demystify some of that stuff. So you can't get through a day without seeing something about a security breach, personal identifiable information being stolen, credit card financial information being stolen. And so let's talk about that real quick. So what are some of the breaches that our clients are going to see?
Absolutely. So when we talk about breaches, we always hear about Equifax, and basically in the last year, because that was a huge release of information. But a lot of people don't have the infrastructure that Equifax has, so they're not going to be faced with that exact type of breach. What people are going to be faced with are those three types that we have listed there. They're going to be faced with viruses, malware, and spyware, where someone like downloads an extension and all of a sudden it's on the machine and they get pop-ups for sites, but it's not just pop-ups for the site, they're also sending out that information that's collected off that machine. A lot of times people are really seeing a lot of phishing emails come through. This is everywhere from the classic Nigerian scam and saying, hey, I've got all this money here, yeah, and I need to release it. I can release it if you give me $5,000. All the way to some more popular ones that I've seen lately. And actually, I do need to give credit for the designer of this one. It's kind of smart, where someone is impersonating the CEO and they say, hey, look, I'm going to start an employee incentive program. I need you to go to Target, buy some gift cards, tell me what the codes are so that way I can set up that program. Now, it's really nice and smart because it's a call to action. They're asking for something that's reasonable because everyone wants to believe that the CEO is going to go ahead and produce the incentive program. So this is a fantastic way to do it. This is also, when we talk about phishing, we also have to be aware that there's like different types of phishing. There's just the general, hey, can you input your username and password here so that way you can see this document that's coming through so that way we can get this order processed, to also spear phishing, which is a targeted attack where someone goes, hey, look, I got a new email. I know we worked together a couple years ago. If you could, I've got this document that I really want you to look over, but our policy means that you have to provide your username and password. Stuff like that comes through.
So, but that's the stuff, that they're going to get in. You get lockware, things like that, but it gets much more nefarious than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what's happening is now we're seeing brute force attacks. We're seeing this the attempt to just not lock down and hold ransom your company information, but also stealing information and utilizing that information, and then they sell all that stuff on the dark web, or worse, if you have engineering data, they're looking to steal that stuff too. And what we're starting to see is some of these attacks like this on the big tier 1 manufacturers are starting to come down. They're not as frequent.
Yeah, so a lot of companies, the tier ones are being faced with something that's called ATP, Advanced Persistent Threats, but a lot of the regular threat actors, they decided that it's not worth it to try and go ahead and breach that company when their supplier is wide open.
Because it's a lot easier to get the stuff out of the small guys.
Exactly.
Grab those. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to do that, because you start losing data like that, you don't protect your data, you're going to lose customers, you're going to lose your business. There are people out there that are looking to steal your data, and they're looking to put you out of business. And that's no joke. So what you may have seen is, as you go through this, you may have gotten a self-assessment from one of your suppliers. It would look something like this. So what is that self-assessment?
Yeah, so that self-assessment is going to ask you lots of questions. Questions such as, who do you report to? Who's responsible for your cybersecurity? Do you track all of the guests that are coming into your building? What's your antivirus policy? Are your computers patched and up to date? And it's a lot of questions.
And some of that stuff is yes, no. Some of that stuff is the degree of compliance. Some of it is written in language that I don't necessarily always understand, and I'm sure our clients don't either. So it can be very time-consuming and onerous to get these types of things. And so as you start to look at these self-assessments, you kind of got to look at, okay, well, what compliances are you going to be responsible for? And there's a whole bunch of them. There's like 700 worldwide, right? So what we're going to do is we're only going to talk about the final few that are going to apply directly to our clients. So let's start with ITAR.
Yeah, so ITAR is the International Trade in Arms Regulations. Basically, all it is that the Department of Defense wants to make sure that any engineering data associated with an order is going to be protected so that way it's not shared with non-U.S. citizens.
Okay, so it's protecting that engineering data so it doesn't get into the wrong hands. All right, and then HIPAA. Everybody knows about HIPAA because we have to sign that thing when we go to the doctor. But how does it apply to businesses?
It applies to businesses if you make anything that's related to the healthcare industry. There are some places that are self-insured, so you have that healthcare data associated and inside your company's domain. So we need to make sure that we protect that healthcare data. I mean, it's not just making sure that it's portable. You also want to make sure that it's safe, because now it's electronic, and now anyone can access it. That compromises that network there. PCI. Payment card industry, a lot of times you'll hear PCI DSS, and make sure that we want to protect any credit card information that comes through. Like I know here at 2W, we don't actually process credit cards internally. We hand it off to a credit card processor that takes care of that information, so that way we don't have to protect that.
So we don't keep any of that stuff in house.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about.
But if we did, we would have to worry about PCI compliance. And then CMMC, which we're going to talk to in a second. It's going to impact virtually everybody on this call, and we'll get there in just a slide or two. Okay, there's SOX, right? There's 3 versions of it. It's confusing. What is it?
Yeah. So SOC started out as a financial regulation, which is why a SOC Type 1 exists. SOC Type 2 is kind of a snapshot of all of your security policies. So basically what happened is the finance people looked at it, they're like, your finance stuff is good, but how are you protecting that data? Which is why we have the SOC Type 2. SOC 2 Type 1. SOC 2 Type 1 means that like they took a snapshot of it, and this is what regulations are there. SOC 2 Type 2 means that instead of just having that auditor there for a day, they're going to keep coming back for a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 just to prove that you have all of these processes and technologies in place over a long period of time. It's really a report that you can share with your customers to say, hey, look, we secure data, we secure our manufacturing processes, and this is how we prove that we did that.
GDPR.
GDPR is the first sort of personally identifiable information protection clause that actually has a lot of teeth to it. I know Google just got hit with like a $5 billion fine because they weren't protecting the data that they said they were. So that is really applicable to a lot of EU citizens. So if you do a lot of business with people that are in the EU, you need to protect that data because now you have that data of that citizen. So the next one is the CCPA, which is really modeled after the GDPR. So California looked at it, they were like, you know what, that's a really good idea. Let's do that here.
So if, even though you don't have to worry about, or maybe don't have to worry about GDPR, it doesn't affect you that much, certainly you're going to be doing business in California. You're going to have to know where that data is stored, and there's other states that are coming down the path on that too, right?
Absolutely. Over the last 2 months, there have been 18 states that have developed a privacy regulation. One of the most far impacting is New York, and that's starting in March. Like they just passed it, and they're already enforcing it in March. So we have to be aware of what's coming down the pike and when those regulations actually come into effect.
So we have to think about that too. So then there are some compliancy bodies that are driving all of this. So let's just kind of walk through that alphabet soup. The NIST.
Absolutely. So NIST, or NIST, is the National Information Standards and Technology Body. It basically produces everything for the government that all government bodies have to comply to. And the reason that, even though we're not the government and we don't have to comply to that, is the private sector looked at it and then thought, they already did all the work, let's follow their standards, which is why the NIST 800-171 is really associated with ITAR a lot. Absolutely.
Okay, so high trust.
High trust, like the NIST standards were created and applied to ITAR, the high trust looked at HIPAA laws, because the actual technological language in there is very, very generic. It just says that you have to protect the data. High trust went, that's very generic. Let's actually produce something that people can follow and audit towards. So high trust created a standard that proves that you are HIPAA compliant.
Okay, then the PCI DSS.
PCI DSS is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. So this is the one that everyone knows about, because that's kind of the reason you have a chip in your card now, and you can use chip and pin instead of having to sign everything. So this is a set of over 400 standards and data points that is set out to protect that payment card.
And then let's go back to the NIST standards real quick. How many? 130?
Yeah, there are 131 different standards within the NIST 800-171 revision A.
So
basically, yeah. So for ITAR, you have to comply to over 140.
And all of that's getting driven by the DoD.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that brings us to the CMMC, which is the next thing coming. It's going to be introduced the first of the year in a couple of weeks, probably start taking effect the middle of 2020.
Yep.
Let's talk about the CMMCs.
Yeah. So the CMMC, which stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So ITAR didn't actually have a certification around it. The CMMC is designed to be an actual certification. So ITAR came out and you were able to say, we followed the NIST 800-171. This is what we did for it, and you never really had to prove that to anyone. And what really happened is the DoD looked at it and they're like, you know what? People are saying they're doing this stuff. No one's actually doing it. So this actually started like back in the first of 2019, and they're developing it now. They're finishing it up, really in a whirlwind, but they're combining 9 or 10 different standards to produce different levels of compliance that people are actually going to be audited to. It's going to be very, very impactful in the manufacturing industry.
So it's not just going to be yes, no, I did this, I didn't do this. It's the degrees of which you comply.
Yeah. So I mean, there's 5 different levels that you can say, you know what, I'm aiming for level 3, so that way I can qualify for all level 3 contracts that are coming from the DoD. Because that's the other thing about it. It's not just the fact that you have to be certified, it's you have to be certified to actually work on the products that the DoD wants. Instead of just the 5 companies and the big primes having to deal with this, all 300,000 people or 300,000 companies within the defense chain have to deal with this.
Say that one more time. 300,000 companies.
Yeah, there are an estimated 300,000 companies that end up providing products to the DoD in some way, shape, or form.
And they're going to fall under this in this process. Okay, so we're going to let's talk about what we need to do to secure your network. How do you build that up? What's an effective compliancy program? The first thing we're going to start with is policies.
Yeah. So when we look at a compliance program, we first have to have the policies in place. It's kind of top-down driven, where you set out the policies. Hey, this is what we do. This is how we do it. And these are the people that are responsible for it. So once you have that sort of framework in place of policies that define, you can't visit this site. You shouldn't be sharing this file in this way. Any visitor that comes in should have a visitor badge. All of this stuff is how you start building out your compliance.
And then after that, we want to talk about how we're going to use the technology.
Yeah. So once we say, hey, you have to use it this way, we've actually got to go to the nitty gritty and say, this is our process for this information. This is how we store it. This is how we protect it. This is how we share it. We're not just sending a file anywhere that anyone can open, anyone can forward. We want to make sure that we're tracking the file. We want to make sure it's only a link, so that way we have that auditing information within the own organization and we don't have to go outside.
So once you decide kind of the way your policies are going to be, your people are going to behave, the way you're going to handle your technology, then you got to land on the actual technology itself. Yeah. So we've got to do monitoring. We've got to have a file share system. Just let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So once you've got the process of how you do it, you actually have to enable your people to do it. A lot of times it's about things that are in the background. So you've like, what email product do you use? Is it integrated with SharePoint or is it integrated with another file sharing mechanism, so that way you can utilize and share your files effectively? A lot of this stuff is really enabled by the technology that it's used. Some of this stuff is in the background, so your people might not know it, but it ends up creating a more secure environment. And our goal here is to build a compliance program that enables the business to be more effective, to gain more contracts, and to save money for the company in the long run.
And you still got to make it usable, though.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
I mean, it's super easy. We just turn off all the technology and you're compliant. So we've got to monitor it. You've got to have logging. We've got to have all that stuff in place.
Absolutely.
Okay. So and then you got to look at what regulations you fall under.
Yeah. So the big thing that's going to drive what policies and what processes and everything that you put into place is, what do you actually have to follow? What are you going to be audited for? This is where the CMMC comes into place. This is where we look at the high trust and PCI. So you've got to determine what actual compliance program your company has to comply to.
And so one of the things we see a lot with our clients is that's kind of driven through their customer base.
Absolutely.
Through the markets that they want to do. They want to start to go after this particular market.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that drives kind of the rest of this. Like, and I get calls all the time, and I know you talk to clients all the time that say, hey, I want to have this part of my business, but I have to become ITAR compliant. What do I have to do to be able to, I've got to do that to bid on this business?
Exactly. Yeah. So first step to do that is you've got to figure out where your gaps are. You've got to provide a self-assessment. You either have to do a self-assessment or you have to partner with someone who can do that. Because not everyone has an IT staff. So we want to provide and really be that partner to reach out and say, all right, hey, if you have this coming up and you want to get this business, you want to be compliant, you've got to figure out where you sit.
Where you're not compliant first. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you got to close the gaps.
Absolutely. So after that, the big part is not just knowing where you are, but where you want to go. So you've got to actually go there. You got to get in the car. You got to drive there.
And that's typically not super difficult, because it's just a lot of it's just work or implementation of certain technologies that you got to put into play. And then you got to be ready for the audit when that happens, and how you survive that audit. So when the audit happens, what are those guys looking for?
It's kind of like a financial audit for everything that you work with, all your computers and stuff. So they're going to look for, what do you have in place and how do you prove it? So what happened on that computer there, and who touched this file, and how can you prove it? A lot of that stuff.
And you've got to have that. It's just like a financial audit.
You've got to provide that information to the auditor.
Sure. And then this isn't just a one and done thing.
No, it's not. In particular, the CMMC is going to require certification at least every other year. For higher levels, they might do it yearly. But it's not just the CMMC that you have to be worried about. It's everything else that changes. It's the changing laws, the changing technologies, how your business itself changes, and what you're going after. So you have to review this stuff yearly.
Just dealing with patches and releases and all the technology and your ERP system and making sure that's up to date. All that stuff has to be current, and you have to prove it. You have to figure out a way to do that. So, Sue, we're going to open this up to questions here. Go ahead and prompt everybody on what they need to do.
Yep, no problem. So if you haven't submitted a question yet, you can still do that. Just go ahead and use the questions box that's up on your screen, and we'll get to those questions as soon as you send them. First question for you two, though. I have a bunch of Windows 7 machines still, and maybe an old server or two. Is that going to be, is that going to cause a problem with getting compliant?
It's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. So as people may or may not know, Windows is actually ending patch support for Windows 7 as of January 20th, 2020. So it's coming up quick. We need to make sure that all of those Windows, there's a plan for those Windows 7 computers, whether it be to replace them, to segregate them out. We can't really have them on the same network as protected information.
And you're just going to fail a compliancy audit.
Absolutely, because as soon as Windows 7 falls out of patch support, every threat actor is going to be looking at Windows 7 because they know that there's companies that still aren't going to be patched, and they're going to develop malware specifically for Windows 7 to target those things that will never be patched.
And that's this goes the same for some of the server operating systems too.
Yeah. So just like Windows 7 is a specific version of the desktop computer, there's also the equivalent for a server. So the Windows 7 basically server version is also going to fall out of support.
So, but a lot of times businesses are forced to use Windows 7. It may be running some of their machines. It might be doing something else. You can't get away from it. There's a way we can set that up on their network.
Yeah. So when the Windows 7 computers and older technology are inherently valuable and can't be easily replaced, because sometimes the CNC machines cost millions of dollars, and you just have to replace one for the newest version of Windows, the math doesn't add up. So we develop network segregation and different technologies to mitigate that threat on your network.
Okay.
All right, next question. What is the cost for 2W Tech to do a review of my compliances? How do I get started?
Well, the way to do it is we need to know what you need to be compliant for. And then what we'll do is we'll sit down and we'll do a gap analysis based upon, on a time and material basis, based upon the work that needs to be done. Yep. You typically do those.
Yep, I sit down with that spreadsheet.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of different pieces of investigatory software that we use to help go deep inside the network, as well as a bunch of other questions. It might be as simple as, are your servers in a locked room? Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. We sit down, we look at what you need to be compliant to, and then we develop that program. We do perform that gap analysis. Like I said, we use that software just because we're humans and we don't want to sit down and go through everything. So we've got pieces of software that enable us to go through everything that's on your network. Cool.
Okay, next question. When you say we could be audited, where does the audit actually come from?
The auditing is going to come from any auditing body. So the high trust, a lot of time the process is, like you said, is we're going to have a customer or someone that is going to, or a supplier that says, all right, you have to be compliant to this standard. So then you have to go out and you actually have to do that. If you have to be high trust compliant, then you have to contact the high trust organization and then say, all right, cool, we need to be here. Can you audit us and make sure that we're effectively there?
And the CMMC is currently contracting with auditing organizations to.
Yep. So as soon as the CMMC is completely solidified, 100%, that actually will be passed off to an organization. And if you want to be bidding on any of the DoD contracts that are coming through for renewal or any new business, you have to be certified. So you have to contact that organization. Cool.
Okay, follow-up question to the Windows 7. Does Server 2008 fall into the same category?
Yep, so that's the version, that's the server version of Windows 7. 2008, 2008 R2 are both falling out of compliance. There is, the only way that you can really keep those actually is you can put them up into Azure, and Windows will provide the continued patching for that, which is really something that a lot of people don't know about.
And we can walk through that. If you have a specific situation like that, we can look at as part of our cloud services providing tier 1 process. We can do that for you.
We'll facilitate that, especially at the end.
Okay. Is being compliant something we need outside help to achieve, or is it something my organization can do on its own?
Don't try this at home. I think the answer is it depends. I think it depends on your current IT group to do that.
If you have an IT team that you work with, that you say, all right, cool, we need to be compliant here, and they can look at that spreadsheet and they're confident that they can fulfill that, sure, you can do that in-house. But that's kind of why I have a job. I love doing this stuff. I like looking at businesses. I like securing them. That's what I do.
So keep Josh employed. And no, I think what it is we've done a lot. We've done work. Both we've gone in and turnkeyed a compliance situation. We've worked with in-house IT staff.
Absolutely.
Several times as well as kind of the subject matter expert. We can do whatever, but I think having another pair of eyes on this stuff is that, somebody who lives it every day like you do.
Yeah.
Because it is involved in it, and it can get super confusing.
Okay, last question, it looks like, unless something comes in while you're answering this one. Can you expand more on the audit process and what I can expect?
So you can expect, the thing with these audits is that the landscape is changing. That's one of the big things with the CMMC that's coming through. I can speak specifically towards a high trust audit pathway, is that you will have an auditor come through and they will have a spreadsheet that they're going to be filling out as well. They're going to be asking for proof of patching. What are the patch logs for this particular computer? How do you process this information? Where does this information sit? How do you secure it? And those are the general guidelines. But like that self-assessment example that we showed a little bit earlier really goes into granular depth of how every computer is situated on your network, how it's designed, what are your notification policies, how do you go through pen tests, are you testing out your policies yearly, are you reviewing them, who actually sits down and looks at your network? All of these questions are going to have to be answered, and so that auditor is going to sit there and they're going to want proof of all of this information, because that self-assessment is really an example of what you have to go through with that auditor. You have to answer all of those questions, and there's some guy sitting there going, yeah, you did this, yeah, you did that, yes, you did this.
So, and doing that and putting that technology into place doesn't have to be super expensive. We've got some very cost-effective ways to make that happen. You can spend as much money as you want to, as you can imagine, on this kind of stuff. But we've got some ways that we can get you into some of these logging technologies and monitoring technologies pretty cost-effectively.
Yeah, because if speaking specifically to the logging piece, a lot of times you'll go Google, all right, hey, I need a computer logger on my network. And you'll get results like Splunk, Alien Vault, and a lot of these other technologies that end up costing hundreds of dollars per gigabyte of information. And that, I think, is absurd. So we've developed a relationship with a company that doesn't charge that much.
Yeah, it just depends on the size of your network. So.
Okay. Great, that was all the questions, guys. Thank you. If any of you have follow-up questions, or if you had a question and you didn't have a chance to ask, Mark and Josh's contact information is up on the screen. You can call our main line or go to our website, or you can even reply back to the reminder email at any time. We also welcome feedback on this webinar, or if you have suggestions for any future webinars you'd like to see, that information is also welcome. Thanks for spending a half hour of your day with us. We want to wish you guys all a safe and happy holidays. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.